off today's proceedings, it's my honor to introduce our opening keynote panel. This afternoon's panel will be moderated by Eve Meyer, the CMO at Splash Media. Please join me in welcoming Eve in this afternoon's panel.
Thank you guys so much. I think it's on. Yes, it is. We know that sometimes panels can be quiet and maybe not that captivating, so we were going to bring in some fireworks. We decided against that, but we plan to have a little chat and make this exciting. So I'm Eve Meyer. I'm the CMO of Splash Media. Splash Media is a company that does digital marketing and videos all over the world for various companies. And I also host the CMO Go Show, which is about to also be on Amazon Prime, where I interview CMOs like yourself. I'm a speaker, writer, and consultant on the topics of marketing and company culture. And I am really pumped today to get to sit with some really smart, good-looking marketing executives. Those were our requirements for this panel. So I would like to introduce you to Devon Jones, Bruce Hershey, Tracy Robertson, Fanette Singer, and what we're going to do now is they're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to tell you what job they do and what that really means. And then each person is going to tell us two truths and a lie about themselves. So at the end, we'll reveal the lie, and we can keep you here until 57 minutes from now. Are you ready? Here we go. We have Fanette. And Fanette, tell us a little bit about yourself and two truths and a lie.
Sure. I'm Fanette Singer. I'm responsible for marketing at Country Financial. We are a broad-based financial and insurance company. We provide services for consumers across the entire spectrum of wealth management products, from protection to asset management, and we're very concerned about financial literacy. And for all of you who don't come from the financial services industry, I hope I can illuminate for you that, yes, this is Financial Literacy Month. And that's not a truth or a lie. That's real. And what I can tell you is that we believe we're a farm-based company, so we were founded by farmers who couldn't get insurance in the 1920s because they weren't sophisticated. They weren't considered business people. My, how that's changed. And so we have a really strong tradition and set of roots and values that has actually led to the core of our brand. And I feel very fortunate for that because so many companies are looking for their brand, looking for their identities. Who are they? And we're very lucky because we came with that and we've kept it all these years. I'm responsible for digital. In our company, digital is owned by marketing. And I'm also responsible for analytics, insights, and metrics. I'm responsible for traditional campaigns, which sit in our advertising department. And I'm also responsible for marketing operations, so marketing technology, traditional activities like events, but also a direct sales center. So it's the full plethora of marketing opportunities sit within my purview, and I feel very lucky because some companies have it disconnected. Some of you may be thinking, oh, gee, I wish we had it all connected. In our company, it is all connected, and we've been given the privilege of having primary responsibility for the customer, which I think is super important. Now for a couple of truths or lies. I've been in the marketing, communication, customer engagement business for 40 years. I'm a ballerina, and I'm a huge football fan.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Tracy Robertson. I work for Kimberly Clark. I've just started there recently in the last 6 weeks, so I'm real excited. I'm leading the Global Vice President of Customer Experience. It's a new role in the organization, and I'll be leading the digital transformation and customer transformation for the organization. So everything digital, data lake, marketing operations, technology, omni-channel, analytics, etc. So real excited about the role. Kimberly Clark is a 150-year-old consumer packaged business organization providing probably very famous brands that you're aware of to both businesses and consumers. So everything from Kleenex to Huggies to Depends. So hopefully I didn't offend anyone, or maybe I should have brought some. And so I will tell you, two truths and a lie. I have to write these down. I'm not as good as you. I have an identical twin sister. I'm an avid whitewater rafting person, and I got married while skydiving.
I have my own, I think.
Oh, sorry. I'll hold it for you.
Yeah.
You're so famous.
Hello.
Come on. Let me hold it for you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Bruce Hershey. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Tailored Brands. We have 5 retail brands. I oversee 4 of the 5, which is Men's Warehouse, Joseph Abboud, Moore's up in Canada, and K&G. And the audience here is Randy Dames. He is the Vice President of Marketing for Joseph A. Bank. So just Tailored Brands, we're really focused on providing an optimum experience, fit, and style for men in America. And it's been an awesome journey. I've been with the company for almost 3 years now. And we're really focused right now on connecting with the customer, unlike we've ever done before. We've sat on a ton of data. We've never really leveraged it. And today we've built a pretty robust CRM team, analytics team, BI team, if you will, digital marketing team. And now we're starting to go to market with some pretty interesting, fun experiences for our customers, which is exciting right now. So with that being said, I'm going to give you a couple, well, maybe 1 lie and 2 truths, I guess, right? One of them, right? Yeah. Okay. So I had to write these down as well. So I've been married for 25 years. I have a 16-year-old daughter and 2 dogs. I scuba dive every summer, and last summer I caught over 80 lobsters. I'm an ex-Navy SEAL, and I was in Operation Desert Storm.
My name is Devon Jones. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Fender. So I've been with the company 3 years. Actually, it was 3 years in March. And in terms of what I do, essentially, I'm heading up the marketing function for the company. We have global offices in the US, UK, Japan. We're opening up in China, Australia. I think maybe just a quick kind of blurb on Fender. For those of you who may not know, it was founded in 1946 by a gentleman named Leo Fender. And I had the fortune to work at Nike for years, and there's always this story about Bowerman and the waffle iron. Well, Leo and the transistor radio is kind of our story. He was not a guitar player, but he wanted to make an amp to help his buddies who played guitar kind of get their sound, and then also innovated guitars, and the first Telecaster was launched in 1951. 70 years later, I describe us as a 70-year-old startup. We're going through the transitions of taking all the great craftsmanship and quality that has established Fender as one of the most adopted brands in the world by artists. And now we're adding the digital capabilities required to help it jump into the next era. Our vision and mission are pretty straightforward, although I would say pretty aspirational. And the vision came from a statement that actually Leo's wife shared with us, which is Leo, in one of his more thoughtful moments, believed that he was put on this earth to help give artists wings. And this was well before Red Bull. So, we've adopted that, and we really look at our mission from a company standpoint is to really serve players at every stage of their musical journey. I guess in terms of a couple truths and a lie. So, number 1, I met my wife, who's from Montana, at an Irish bar in Budapest, Hungary. Number 2, I once subbed in for Charles Barkley in a pro game in France. And then number 3, just last year, I got to sit in on rhythm guitar with the Foo Fighters at Cal Jam during sound check.
Okay. Hang on. Foo Fighters.
I'm going to hold on to this. I just felt like I should mic.
I know, you should pass it to somebody. Foo Fighters where?
It's 3 lies and no truth, right? Oh.
Foo Fighters, where are you with them?
Sound check.
Sound check. Okay.
During Cal Jam.
Got it. Thank you so much. For those of you following along and taking pictures of us, we just wanted to remind you, much like Beyonce, please don't post any unflattering pictures of us. Thanks. Here we go.
My agent's outside.
What's that?
My agent's outside.
Okay, good. Thank goodness. All right. So this program is called Defining Future Marketing Success, Leveraging the Prosumer, Social Media as the New Television, and the Emergence of Blockchain MarTech. So this question we didn't discuss, but I just want to ask you, do we as leaders in marketing feel like we just have to be like every other industry and throw like blockchain, the word blockchain, just like say it as much as we can? Just curious.
No.
No, we don't feel like we have to. Are we really using blockchain regularly at this point in marketing, or are we just trying to sound cool?
So just based on my experience working, coming from GE for the last 10 years, and I do get asked to speak to a lot of different companies. I think many companies are really at a starting point with many of their technologies, even AI and predictive. Some companies have it figured out, but I mean, the way things are changing, this is just based on my observations, it's slow. I think it's just it's a lot of terms. If you've got it together, that's fantastic. But I think a lot of companies are just struggling to get the basics and the foundations right, especially how fast everything is moving today. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think for us, blockchain is more a function in our finance area right now. They're more concerned about that. Same with our investment guys, because they're looking at digital currencies, and so they're much more focused on it at the moment than I am.
Thank you for answering that. As we sit here with you guys and all of you, some of the most impressive CMOs we have, I feel like there are a lot of CMOs and VPs of marketing that I've talked to recently who are saying, there's a lot of terms out there that we feel like we need to pretend like we know and completely understand, and we're not actually using yet. So thank you for addressing that question. As marketers, how are you capturing results and data? How are you actually doing that to maximize the customer experience?
For us, the challenge is that we're doing it in a lot of different places, and I'll bet you if I asked each of you, you'd probably be saying the same thing. Our various teams are capturing that data for different things. So we have a lot of different product groups. So our life insurance folks are really interested in capturing data around your health and your lifestyle. And our claims folks are really interested in capturing your data around what claims you've had, what likely fraud there might be for those who commit insurance fraud. And for me, I'm really interested in being predictive and personal. So where those things come together for us is where the magic happens, where I can leverage the claims data, where I can leverage the investment data and the behaviors and be very personal in then responding to consumers in that same way. And so I know that some of us are interested in data lakes and managed data processing. And for us, that's really the name of the game right now, because if I can get to the data at the right time, I can speak to you as an individual and really address your needs proactively, and isn't that what we all want? So that's, I think for us, it's recognizing where the data is, finding ways to bring it together, recognizing that maybe not all of us have responsibility for bringing it together, but becoming advocates for thinking creatively about where customer interactions take place, so that how those interactions take place can become part of the way you interact with your consumers.
Absolutely. As marketers, how are you capturing results and data to maximize the customer experience?
Okay, so I'll take this, and then if you guys want to go. Being new at Kimberly Clark and this being, my primary job is to enhance the, end-to-end customer experience. One of the things, just like you said, we have data. I'm more than a marketer, so my background is marketing, but I also have commercial sales, communications, et cetera. When you think about a holistic customer experience, it's not just about the commercial piece, right? So I look at it more than just collecting the marketing interactions. I look at it like all the different functions, because and how we get all that data collected all the way through post-sale, right? Supply chain, whatever. Because I think if you do everything right in commercial, right, as marketers, as salespeople, you do everything right, but we really screw it up on the back end, or we screw it up in delivery or whatever, the mindset, you're starting over again with loyalty, right? And then I also think if you can understand that holistic experience and then build on top of it the analytics that you need and visualize that data, then you can start to make impacts on customer service. Otherwise, I think you're just plugging a lot of holes along the way. You really need that end-to-end data set view, because that's where I think you start to get really smart around where you need to start pulling levers. But.
So I wonder, do many of you have concerns around master data management right now? Because that's pulling that together. Not so much, some?
Raise your hand if you do have concerns about that right now. Okay.
I mean, for us, so it's interesting. I have major concerns about it. So Men's Warehouse, as I said earlier, tailored brands as a whole, we sit on a ton of data. We have over 50 million men in our database. And that's what, wow, right? It's a lot of consumers in there. But we've never really leveraged it until the last few years. And how we've been leveraging it sometimes has been in silos, right? And that's, you talk about technology or blockchain, like the shiny object. So that's what happens, right? So a report gets pulled, you get in front of the executives, and next thing you know, okay, go do this. But why? And so for us, it's about trying to aggregate that data. And as we start to look at all the different touch points that are coming into the organization, we have over 36. So it's accounting, you got CRM, the list goes on, right? And so all this data is coming in. So those are your rows, and your columns coming down are all those reports. It's consumer data. It could be Ipsos. It could be brand tracker. I mean, the list goes on. And so we're in the process of building a funnel, right? And the funnel comes in, and as you pull it out, that's when you start capturing your insights versus in these siloed zones that unfortunately starts to create controversy. It has you build strategies around something that's probably not going to work. And so, that's our big objective right now is taking the silos out, pulling them into a funnel, bringing that down into proper insights so it can actually be successful. And we're getting there. I mean, the campaigns that both Randy and I have been pulling into market lately are taking bits and pieces of that, not the full picture, but enough for us, to, statistically speaking, for us to make decisions, right? And that's, how us as an organization are seeing these peaks, right? And these minor successes as we're taking this journey. And we have a long way to go, but I will tell you that, be very, very careful in these sideload reports because they will get you in trouble. I mean, matter of fact, we had one a couple weeks ago when, the data came in and said, well, the consumer said this, and it's one view. Oh, so stop doing it. Why? Because it's one view. That's why you shouldn't do it. Well, no, we should do that. And so it's just a big talk track that you should avoid those, right? So my recommendation is if you are living in a siloed world of data, do your best to work with your data team, your CRM team, or your BI team, and try to aggregate multiple touch points so you can bring it through and have a logical conversation about what you should and should not be doing.
Yeah, I think we may be a little bit more on the front end of that journey. So when I started 3 years ago, at the same time we brought in a new CEO and actually established a GM of digital. One of the things we really wanted to do was to build the infrastructure and platform support and engineering and development that would allow us to really get a much better picture of how consumers are using our products, but also help reach a new generation of players. If you look at the business we're in, it's predominantly old school retail that has now, in the last 10 years, really started to emerge into hybrid retail and into pure play retail as well. It used to be, 20 years ago, it was unthinkable that you would buy a guitar online without having a chance to see it and hold it and touch it, and yet some of the most successful businesses in our industry are pure play retailers who now have incredible customer service. But for us, the decision that we made was to introduce a series of products and services that were really designed to accompany players on their journey. And what it's done is it's generated a ton of data, some of which looks great in presentations, some of which gives us great information about what's going on. But I would say from a brand standpoint, we're very much in the acquisition mode of understanding consumer behavior. We're not yet in sort of the activation mode and then the true retention strategy that maps them to a journey that we intend or we can respond to. And I'll give you one example of that. We launched something about a little over a year and a half ago called Fender Tune. And essentially it's a tuner app. Why does the world need another tuner app? There's 35 tuning apps that are available in the App Store today. What's interesting about every other app, they assume you know how to tune the guitar to start. So we said, hold on a second. Someone who gets a guitar may not know what an E is. Let's just make this as simple and intuitive as possible. In the last 18 months, we have 2 million downloads on the app. We can now tell you what are the most popular tunings around the world at what time of day. Fun fact, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. is the #1 most used time for the tuning app everywhere. So that's a lot of good lunch breaks, or that's a lot of late rising artists. We're not sure. And we can also tell you, for example, Drop D had a spike in Indonesia five months ago. We can't really connect it to anything. So, But as we kind of get into this, what we're looking at is what are the behaviors that we can start to thread into a true player experience that we can then turn into an incentivized relationship with the brand. Incentivized not just commercially, but incentivized to keep participating, playing, engaging, and sharing. But I would say, relative to where we'd like to be, we are still very much early days, and it's only in the last couple weeks that we've actually decided to merge the marketing and the digital infrastructure into one organization now on my team. And what we're trying to figure out is how do we establish CRM as a core center of excellence for the company? And in fact, we're now going to go live with a search for a VP of CRM growth and media, the first we've ever had, but a really exciting opportunity for us to leverage what is effectively a pretty passionate audience that we just don't know much about yet.
Thank you guys so much for sharing that. In my past 12 years of working with companies of various sizes, B2B, B2C, internationally, some nonprofit, I've heard the same answer time and time again. We know how to spend money to buy tools to collect data. We can collect all kinds of data. And I loved what you said, Bruce, about it being siloed, because I feel like the CMO has become the champion of breaking down the silos of a company where people really used to hoard this information and really hate each other. Marketing hated sales and communications hated marketing, and everybody hate each other and took all this information. And now the CMO kind of has to break it down and say, yeah, we have all this information, but we actually don't have answers from the data. And I think I'm really proud of you for saying that out loud. And I think that's the issue that we hear CMOs really struggling with this moment, getting closer and closer, but not completely there yet.
I mean, the nut for me on that and other what I would call fundamental marketing strategies or tactics, like you have to get those right before you start diving into the shiny objects.
Yes.
Right? You have to, because if you don't, shiny objects aren't going to work. I mean, you're going to spend a lot of money. You might get a high five, but that's about it.
Thank you. So what's the best way, and I'll start with you this time, Evan, what's the best way to market a brand's prosumers without alienating those newer to the product?
Working on that. I think for us, I'll go back to this notion of being a 7-year-old startup. About 3 years ago, we first arrived in the company, and I've been playing my whole life, all of us have. We had assumptions around what the consumer makeup and segmentation looked like, but we commissioned what I think might have been the first sort of overall segmentation study the company had done and maybe had been done in the industry. Some of the stuff that came back was eye-opening. One of the most powerful pieces of information was that 50% of all new guitars at that time in the last 5 years have been bought by females, by girls and women, not as gifts, but to play. I think if you were to walk into any guitar shop, you probably wouldn't have felt that response. And a lot of it is passionate dudes running stores for dudes, by dudes. And you kind of get it because it's a hobbyist market. But obviously what has happened is that purchase was being driven online. So I'll remember the first sales meeting we had to launch our acoustic line, and 70% of all those purchases are acoustic. I stood up and said, hey, great news. We're going to market acoustics with women. Here's the 5 bands that we have lined up. And the sales force looked at me and said, wait, we can't do that. You're going to turn this thing into a female acoustic. Like, we can't do that. And I said, and if it happens, you'll thank me, because that is where the growth's going to come from. Since then, what we've seen is a massive influx of female artists into not just acoustic, but into electric. And if you look at what's happening in media, you're starting to see articles that say the future is female. And it might be the Taylor Swift effect from 5 years ago, where they came in, got comfortable, and now wanted to migrate up. But I will tell you, the challenge we've had is to balance the messaging that's required to reach that audience with the message that's required to reach somebody who's got 5 custom shop guitars, 45 in their collection, has been with the brand since 1960, and probably went to a Jimi Hendrix concert. And so some of the things that we've focused on is to really hone in on what's the universal truth and brand DNA that everybody can kind of lean into. There is sort of that moment in sports. When I was at Nike, we used to talk about it's the senior captain in high school on the football team that's the epicenter for the ambitious positioning of football. We think for us, it's that person who's finding that creative freedom. So we spend a lot of time communicating sort of the passion and excitement around creating music and playing music. And when we introduce new artists to our audience, we're very careful to make sure we highlight their technical abilities as well as their style. There's a ton more that goes into it for us, but I think what we've learned is we have a legacy core and a new core. And we've asked ourselves, does a 25-year-old Telecaster player have more in common with a 55-year-old Telecaster player or a 25-year-old when it comes to choosing that next Tele? And it's a little bit of both, but as a brand, we're making that transition. And the best part for us is, I think when I think about prosumers, we're fortunate that we've been adopted by more artists on more stages than any other brand. And so one of our biggest strategies was actually, rather than try to come out with a brand voice in a Fender brand campaign that we think people would respond to, we made the conscious decision to describe the Fender brand voice as the sum total of the voices of the artists who use it. So consequently, when we launch campaigns, we have ideas, but we turn the creative control over to them. And I'll just give you one example that's my favorite. I'm not pitching you on going to watch the video, but if you do, that's great. I don't know how many of you here are Red Hot Chili Peppers fans and know who Flea is, but we did a signature bass with Flea a year and a half ago. And one of the parts of that project was he said, yeah, that's fine, we're gonna do this, but I want my daughter to shoot the spot. We said, okay, that sounds great. We gave him the camera, we gave him the budget, he went away, they came back with pure gold. We couldn't have scripted it any better. And to this day, like, who knew Flea was a beekeeper? I didn't know. But him on his roof saying what he wanted to say, it ended up getting 250 million views within about a month. Our impressions, it ended up getting a couple million views at the same time frame because he pushed it on his channels. And so, I guess maybe a short way of saying that is the authenticity factor is really critical when you're trying to span generations. And in our case, we don't pay artists to use our product. We really invest in making the right product and then amplifying their voice. And at least it seems to be working to bridge generations.
We're a little bit different, not such a sexy product. Don't laugh. So in our case, we know that we've got this amazing heritage story, and it's one that a lot of people relate to. We do the right thing. That's why we're in business. We've always done the right thing. And that's sort of a universal truth, and that applies to multi-generations. So the good news is that we've got a story that really we think isn't generation specific, but how we reach them and the need to segment that story in a way that will grab attention from each of the groups and feel salient to the groups is really the key. So we think about the 55-year-old who's at a different place in their financial journey than the 22-year-old, and we talk to them differently because they want to be spoken to differently, but also we speak to them on different channels. And interestingly enough, some of you may be aware of this, but Facebook is our best channel for the 55-year-old group. They're all out there. So not necessarily what you think. Instagram is the place we like to be for our 22-year-old customers and prospects. And so the channel matters, the message matters. So our 22-year-olds seem to prefer a 15-second video. They want it to be relevant to their lives. They're not really interested in hearing about their parents' lives. And our 55-year-olds are in a very different place in their life journey and their financial security. And they're very concerned about thinking about retirement. I was sharing earlier that our 55-year-olds, we did a survey of all of our customers, and I don't know if this resonates with you. I'd be interested in your opinions on this, but the single most valuable thing that our customers told us that mattered to them, their goals, when they think about financial goals, are around travel. Does it relate to your life? So certainly I'm not in the travel business, which is unfortunate because I know what to do if I were. But it's really striking to think about what financial freedom or financial security means, not in terms of the way we would think of it as products. And so again, it's around segmentation and thinking about how it matters to them, not how it matters to me. So how do my products matter in the context of their dreams being about travel? And that's the challenge. And recognizing that financial security isn't for them having the biggest pile of money or having the most possessions to insure or driving the fanciest car like it used to be. That whole world is changing, and interestingly enough, the youngins are driving the change for the oldins. And so we're trying to figure out how to communicate that way in where the customer is, in the way that they want to be spoken to, in the medium that matters. And that's where that measurement piece comes back in. So you got to know where they are and what matters to them. And so we're continually testing, not just watching their behavior, but out speaking to them and our financial reps who are there with them every day.
Are we getting closer to Are we getting closer to an attribution model that actually tells what content is working?
I'll be the chicken. Yes. No, we are not, by the way.
Good answer, very good.
And it's a challenge, right? Because we have this ongoing debate, I think, every day in our organization. Our digital marketing team will come to the table and say, hey, we drove, 55% of the business this week. How did you do that? And so, well, that's because we track coupons and we track this. Okay, so you're telling me that the TV didn't work, you're telling me that the social didn't work, and it's all purely based off of you doing rev tracks or something like that. Yep. Okay. And so when I say that statement, I don't say it to be disrespectful. I say it because it's so important to find that true attribution, and it's hard. We've even gone to the point of trying to build a custom one, and it's hard, and it's expensive, especially because of all the broadcast spin that we do. It's really hard. And so, no, it's not there. Even building custom is hard to find. Some of the better ones out there that I've been tracking on, Capital One, by the way, has a good one. They built a custom one, though. It's really good. But it's really hard. But it's a conversation that gets sometimes challenging, confrontational, if you will, because everybody wants to say that I'm taking demand or I'm building demand. And as an example, we did some loyalty testing between the brand team and the CRM team, and it was pure traditional, right? And so we didn't tap into digital whatsoever. We did some traditional elements, which actually works really well with that customer on our loyalty program. And we drove, around $15 million in incremental lift in Q4. And that's a big number. But when I presented it, I didn't present that we took 100% of it. I didn't even present that we took 60% of it. I went to the table and said, hey, we drove 20% of this. And that was a gut check, right? Which is not the right thing to do. But I knew better than to say that we're capturing all of this demand. I knew better, right? Because we're not. Because it takes a complete picture. It takes every single channel, every single media firing on all cylinders to create that. And then you go, okay, well, let's pull one off and see what happens. And then guess what? Sales drop. And then they're pointing fingers again. So, no, there's no attribution. And I wish there was.
Thank you. How has budgeting, like your particular budgeting, I know you're new to your role, Tracy, but for the rest of you who have been in this role for a while, how has your budgeting changed over 2 years? And have you shifted money away from ads and towards influencers? I'm curious to know.
Absolutely. So we, this year, made an even greater shift toward digital influencers in particular. Brand spokespeople, again, I talked about the segmentation and the individual groups and what they look for and who their idols are or the people who they believe in. And if they're aligned with our brand values, we want other people to speak on our behalf. We're kind of modest, and so to us it matters very much that someone else is talking about us more than we're talking about ourselves. And we want it to resonate. We want it to be true. We used a lot of mommy bloggers a couple years ago because when do you want to buy life insurance? When your kid's born. All of a sudden you have new responsibilities that you recognize you got to take care of. And so the same is true for other folks, again, around financial security for folks later in their financial journey. What we found is that it really resonates for them about how to save for retirement. We're kind of experts in that, but we also know there are other folks who are expert in that, and so we want to bring people along with us. We've started doing a lot of PR with our executives team, and it sounds so old school, but what's happened is that brands, especially financial services brands, haven't been trusted because we hit our executives behind the desk and we let other people be our spokespeople, or we made fun with some of those other brands who have animals and lizards and things like that. But there are real people behind those desks, and those people really care deeply about the financial security of our customers. And so we've brought them out, and we're finding that that is resonating unbelievably strongly. So we've moved quite a lot of our budget to PR. In fact, this year, and influencers in particular, this year we put 3 new folks out in our primary markets to be local marketing spokespeople and to look for local folks who can be influencers in those markets, because in the end we're all about where we live and our communities.
Yeah, I'd say we 3 years ago, we made a huge kind of shift from being very retail and print oriented to being almost entirely digital. And one of the biggest things we wanted to do was to create content that was as thoughtful as the products we make, but also that artists would want to be a part of and that people would want to share. And we also focused on the basic informational content to help you understand what we make. And we provided it to all of our retailers. What has happened is in the last 3 years, we estimate that the amount of online business done across all of our indirect retail channels has probably gone from 35% to over 55%. And that's a pretty rapid shift. And we really try to support and drive the consumer in the store with digital content. And so the amount of storytelling that we're doing that's where the biggest investment is. The second biggest investment for us, now that we've, I think, started to really generate growth, is as we've doubled our social channels, now we're investing in what we're sort of calling level up content. And the whole idea behind that is it's way more authentic, way more creator oriented. It's way more accessible and really allowing you as a user to kind of go as far down the rabbit hole of learning as you want to, but without having to sort of go through the Fender brand message or any other brand message and just get straight into the journey that we believe people want. So again, all of that is content driven and it's entirely digital.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So yes, at my prior role, we did the same thing. We moved all to digital content. The salespeople had heart attacks when we took their PowerPoints away, but it was a long transition to move them to digital. It certainly helped with getting one source of truth. That really helped instead of everyone kind of creating their own thing, and then just making it very experiential for the customer, right? So we did not use PowerPoints. We were modeling equipment. We were 3Ding everything, and eventually that was a 3-year journey. That took us about 3 years to get the organization to really understand, like, this is how we can get people to really engage. And we used that in all of our integrated campaigns, those digital assets, and we drove a very large pipeline and orders as a result of that. But a very big cultural shift, because these guys had been selling the same way forever. So just that cultural transformation was really hard. We were ready, the organization was not. So
for us, influencers have worked and they haven't worked. I think for us, if a gentleman can't see himself wearing a product, in other words, we talked about this earlier, if he sees Brad Pitt wearing a suit, he doesn't see himself in that suit. And so that's why it hasn't really worked for us as a whole. But we continue to test it, and we are shifting dollars digitally, right, to be more connected with our customer. But at Men's Wearhouse, we realized after extensive research and insights and reviewing all the data that we needed a face, because at some point when Men's Wearhouse started over 45 years ago, it was founded by George Zimmer, and he was the face of the brand. And he was very proud and very loud on TV and did a great job of driving the business and transforming the business. But when we lost George, the brand sort of maybe lost its way a little bit, right? We started to push this fashionista sort of stuff, and it wasn't resonating with the customers. And so what we ended up doing was bringing back the tagline, but in a more relevant way, more engaging way, such as, she's gonna like the way you look, you're gonna like the way you look, your boss gonna like the way you look. And then on top of that, we said, well, we should deliver this, but we can't deliver it over VO like we normally do. So let's go find a brand ambassador. And so we homegrown and grew this brand ambassador, as you've seen in our television ads today, and now we're starting to bring him across, because now he's coming into his second season with us, continuing to work. Results are very positive. Not just men are liking him, but also the females loving him. And that's great, because we want to invite her in. We don't want her to think this is a boys' club where she can't come in there and buy something for the man in her life. And so we have shifted dollars that way to be more relatable to our customer.
Thank you. What do you find is the most impactful way for brands to build communities?
Well, I think from my standpoint, social media, no surprise, is a massive lever that you can pull. But I think kind of it allows you to test things. It allows you to try things. And I think if you can find people that are passionate about the brand, and whether if you have a highly engaged audience and you can focus on increasing the reach and the influence of your social community, I think that's a great strategy. And there's things that we've seen, for example, when we see an artist, for example, there's an artist named Tash Sultana who, has now kind of jumped up, but 2 years ago, she was playing guitar out of her living room or her bedroom in Australia. And we saw her on a video. We watched it garner, 100,000 views, 150. We actually put some paid media behind it and boosted it, and it ended up tripling, quadrupling her audience almost overnight. As a result, we sort of ended up with a relationship with her, and for the next 3 or 5 videos, we did the same thing. That cost us very little, but it was just taking the time to have channel managers focused on what's happening in each channel, understanding the dynamics of what's happening in each channel, and then also building relationships with critical influencers out there. I think the other thing that's really important is just to be responsive. It's one thing to have a channel where you can deliver messaging, deliver content, and inspire, but I think the whole notion of being a partner to somebody and having a two-way relationship, you have to be responsive on your social media channels. I think everybody here probably knows that intuitively, and hopefully is doing the same thing. Sometimes it's a hard line to know how far to engage, but what we find is the more we engage, the more response we get and the more loyalty we get. So I think that's a big, obvious lever.
Evan, you have, once again, this unfair advantage around passion, right? Because in the end, we all want to be connected on passion. The way we drive passion isn't, I'm going to sell you that insurance policy you've been dying to have. It's really more around what people like to do in their communities. And so we drive passion around charitable giving and activities around financial security of folks who might not be able to get good financial support. And that takes, when you think about it broadly, that takes in a whole lot of things. A lot of our folks are very active in Habitat for Humanity. So we have a captive rep force of about 2,000 people. And they're very activist in building homes for folks who don't have the means. And I don't know if you all know this, and this isn't a commercial for Habitat, but Habitat requires that folks become financially savvy in order to own a home. And before they're allowed to participate in the program, they're required to prove that they can pay part of the expenses of that home. And so there's an educational element around that. So our folks are the educators in that space. So we're not trying to sell passion around insurance. We're trying to sell passion around communities and how to help communities grow and prosper. And I sure wish we had a Fender guitar, a Telecaster, or a Strat would be great, but we've got this.
We can drop one in the community if you like.
Please, thank you. We can do this together.
I have a community too.
Get a guitar.
But I'm in. But what we can see is that it's not just Habitat. Every community has places where you can link in to folks' financial security, and we really do believe, like the farmer's story, that everyone deserves that right, that privilege of having financial security, having a financial plan if they want one. And so with that, it democratizes the financial institution in a way that most people don't talk about it, but that's how we talk about it.
What do you guys, as futuristic predictions, think the future of marketing and content generation will look like in 2030?
Amazing.
Good answer.
I've only got the 2027 view, so.
Yeah, tell me. And will we be in flying cars,
Well, I think increasingly what we're finding, and I think I pinch myself because I think the good fortune we have is we get to work directly with creators who serve as influencers for others. And the relationship we have is so authentic, and we really strive to make it a relationship, not a sponsorship, that it opens up a level of creativity you wouldn't otherwise get. And if you look at the lifestyle brands out there, and just to kind of go into that space, the brands who are having success are not the ones creating taglines and campaigns and forcing you to look at them. They're actually allowing the influencers who care about the brand to develop their own voice around it and their own narrative. And off of that, there's sub-communities that are popping up. I think, too, one of the things, just if I use music as a proxy, we've seen a massive influx of artists in the last 3 to 5 years who have been inundated with digital capabilities, digital recording stations, and they're now on a broad scale sort of turning back to physical experiences, turning back to authentic forms of expression, and then marrying that with the digital component in a much more nuanced way. And I think that's where the sort of personal experiential opportunities will exist. So to give you an example, we're working with an artist today who, all I'll say is legendary 25-year hip-hop producer who happened to share with us that the very first bass riff he ever created was with a Fender bass that he went to Jamaica and purchased because of somebody told him it was a good idea. Years later, his band has been heard by millions, but his vision is to actually demonstrate to more disadvantaged kids that they're just one bass lick away from a sample. So we're working with him and his crew on content, but also a community strategy that's going to put more music in the hands of schools, in the hands of youth. And I think that's actually where the content plus the experience plus the authenticity, sort of come together. I love the example that you talked about, but I think increasingly the idea that brands are going to control the narrative, I think it's going to be more, we can create a marketplace where ideas can live, but going to have to get comfortable with all of that being the sum total of what the brand stands for.
I think that's great. I agree with you. So I put on this question, I wrote down and circled, I hope there's a lot less of it. There's too much content, right? But to your point, I think content's going to be very emotional. I think we're going to go. It's going to be driven by. It's not going to be about the brand. It's going to be driven by the user. I think storytelling will never go away. I think the art of storytelling, and I don't think a lot of people do it very well. That's just my opinion. I think it needs to be a discipline in marketing. And then I think content's going to be really around values. I think people are, especially the millennials, Gen Z, they are very value-driven buyers. And so, I think we have to think a lot about that. And I think that content is going to be very much about the story, and then the product or the brand gets to wave on the way in. And people are going to be rallying around values, and it's going to be kind of lovey-dovey and emotional, and that's really uncomfortable for people, but I think that's where it's going. I think that's what content looks like, but I think it's a lot less. I think there's way too much content. We just keep creating it, and sometimes I think we do it to justify positions or, oh, we did this, and I just don't think it's helping, right? So that's maybe very controversial, but that's my opinion.
I know Eve wanted a good fist fight, so this is it. I think that there'll be endless content created. I think we won't get to be the owners of it. We'll be the recipients of it, but the stories more and more, again, are being democratized. You get to tell the story of a brand. Many of us get to tell the story of other people's brands. I could tell you a Fender story. But I think that there'll be endless Uh-oh.
Mic drop.
But I think that the stories are going to continue to explode. One of the things I was charged with when I first got to country was, how can you help call, and I'll bet you some of you had this as well, how can you help the call center get less calls? What can you do from a digital perspective so that you can allow self-service and therefore fewer calls will come into the call center? And I dutifully gave it a lot of thought and put out some self-service tools, and what happened? Call center calls remain the same, and there's even more activity now than ever before happening on our digital channels and self-service channels. And I think our expectations all at our fingertips, and those who are coming up behind us, are all very cognizant of the fact that we can get what we want when we want it immediately. And that's true for storytelling, and that's true for everything about what we're creating. So I think there's going to be an explosion, even bigger than it already is. It's just we don't get to own it.
No, exact. That's what I meant. I hope marketers will stop creating unnecessary content that's probably sometimes not that meaningful. Mm-hmm. Yes, the end user will drive the story, right? So for sure.
I'm sorry. That's not what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a cat fight. I apologize to all of you. So sorry. Sorry about that.
So I have one thing. I think that's where the prosumer really comes in, right? Because what happens is that the brand stops really telling the stories and the consumer start telling the stories together, right? And so I agree that I don't think content's it's going to explode. I agree with that. But I also think that, you know, to your point, it's all about being relatability, right? And if it's not relatability, you know, there's not that connection with the customer, they're not going to connect with it. Matter of fact, your story that you thought you were telling is just not going to be told the way you want to tell. And so for us, you know, we've embarked on a new content strategy at Men's Warehouse, and we're in the process of executing on it right now. And I got to tell you, to your point, like, it's not just go creating shit for the creating shit, right? It's there's a lot of research and analysis that said we should go do this because we're a brand that's been doing it for 45 years, and we just haven't told that story. We just got to go tell those stories and help guys how to dress and look good in every day.
All right. What are the skills and talents you seek internally on your marketing team as the future changes? How are you finding the right people?
How are we finding them, or what are the fit? So obviously everyone knows, right? The talent war is going to get very, especially in marketing, because of the changing marketing organization, is going to get really ugly. So in technologists, the hybrid marketer IT person is really critical today because of what is needed. But those people are going to be very hard to find. And so, I was speaking about this earlier. A, they're expensive. B, there's high turnover, especially in data scientists, data analysts, as you're building those capabilities. You may have to take a really hard look inside your own organization and go, where can we get high growth potential people and train them ourselves, because it's going to be so hard to find them. But recruiters like yourself helping. And then again, just, I don't think we're, at least what I'm assessing in my early days at KC, I'm not seeing that we're tapping into our own employee base, right? Yeah, and this is true. 50% of employees are not engaged. Hopping jobs all the time. I think there's something there that has to be looked at as far as the ability to really tap talent for the future, and also to make them a community group for your organization. So we're out talking, how do I create ambassador groups and groups outside? But you've got a lot of people on the inside that if you could figure that out, the multiplier effect of their networks is huge, right? So, but yeah, the data part and the business IT hybrid part, because so much of our work now is going to be technology and technology enablers and that scares me. I don't know if that scares any of you guys, but that talent is really far and few between. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting the rapid acceleration of digital skill sets and specialists. And I think in a business our size, we only have room for so many specialists. We want specialists and generalists who also have, in addition to that very vertical skill set, the ability to think about the brand and consumer almost from a top of funnel all the way through perspective, which is a much softer science. Yeah. And so, I think from a marketing standpoint, I'm always looking for people who can really kind of play both sides of that coin. All the way down to, if you're the head of artist marketing or you're the head of CRM, you need to be comfortable in both spaces. And I think that's a big challenge.
It is.
So usually we have the audience ask a question, but I thought this time we'd have somebody from the panel ask the audience a question. So who is going to do that?
I could be a thief and ask you how many of you play guitar. Okay, then I'll go my own. How many of you have bought a life insurance policy in the last 5 years? Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was an excellent question.
So
I really liked it.
So life insurance is sexier than guitar. You're saying? Yeah. I don't agree with that. I don't agree.
Your question?
That was my question.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, actually, off of that, so since you opened that up, how many of you have ever tried to play guitar? How many of you still play guitar?
Still learning.
So, one of the most interesting things that we came upon in the last few years is in addition to the study, we looked really closely at what's going on with guitar from a life cycle standpoint and what's happening in the market. What we found is the new and used guitar markets are roughly the same size, but the learning market is 8 times the size of the new market, which is interesting. And the fastest growing segment within that market is online learning. The other thing that we looked at is we think about 40 to 45% of all the guitars we sell each year, new, are to first-time players. And then the third fact that came in is that 90%, and I think that was pretty much what I just saw, 90% drop out within the first year, if not the first 3 months. So our big strategy, and this gets into the skill set of what we're trying to find and how we evolve the data, is we launched something this last year called Fender Play. And essentially, it's an online subscription service designed to accompany you on your beginning journey to help you learn to play a song as quickly as possible. We're not going to make you learn theory and practice unless you want to. And our whole ambition behind this is that if we can reduce, we don't believe we have an awareness rate, we have an abandonment rate. Because right now, the 10% who make it through are the ones who are driving the industry. And they're like me or others who own between 6 and 15 guitars. So if we can reduce that abandonment rate even by 10%, over time, we could potentially double the size of the market. And that's really the quest that we're on. And so for us, understanding the data and how to leverage it is just as important as understanding what those pain points are. And what's really amazing when you ask people why they stopped playing guitar, it's actually some pretty simple stuff. A string broke. I didn't know what to do. It went out of tune. I wasn't sure how to handle that. If only you could have called somebody. Or, wow, this really hurts. And what's interesting, too, is that most people, when they buy a guitar for themselves or their kid, will buy an oversized, steel-strung acoustic guitar, which might be the most difficult way to learn. And along those lines, we recently have entered into kind of a partnership with Grace Vanderwall, who is a uke player. She's 14 years old. We're getting ready to launch a product with her later this year. Ukulele, it's a 4-string, nylon-strung, super easy. You can get a chord with one finger. Case study in my house is my 12-year-old went from not knowing what to do to suddenly singing a song with that. So I think I only bring it up because you're exactly like what we see across the board. And so, when you get into how do you enhance, I think one of the ways we hope to expand our community is to actually open it up and become more inviting to beginners as well. So just wanted to share that. But since you opened up, I figured I'd ask the question. Yeah.
Well, I have learned a lot today. Number 1, attribution is not clear yet. Number 2, Fanette has a secret Fender story. And number 3, Flea is a beekeeper. So I think we have learned a lot in this room today, and I just wanted to point those points out. So we're going to now do 2 truths and a lie. So when you hear the lie, I would like you to raise your hand. I'm going to trust you, and if you get all 4 right, come see me, and I'll mail you a free copy of my book. I have 2 books. One's on marketing and social media. And if you're like, that sounds horrible, I also have an online dating book. So you get to pick which goal you have in life, okay? So we'll take care of that. All right, here we go. You ready? Fanette, raise your hand when you hear the lie. Don't only raise your hand once, okay? Is the lie she has been in marketing for 40 years? Okay? Is the lie she is a ballerina? And is the lie she's a huge football fan? Fanette, please reveal your lie.
You're right. I am not a football fan. I hate football.
All right. This is riveting. Okay, here we go. And she's a ballerina, so later there will be a show.
I've
All right.
been dancing since I was 3.
Oh my gosh. Will you be doing some ballet later for us? How many drinks will that take? All right.
That's a good question.
Good. Okay. Next to Tracy. She is an identical twin sister.
I'm going there, sure.
Yeah? Okay. She, I think I got this right, went whitewater rafting. Avid whitewater rafter. That's the lie. I don't believe that. Okay. And she got married while skydiving. All right. It's time.
I did not get married while skydiving.
No. Okay.
Scared to death.
Oh my gosh.
Scared to death of heights.
What's your twin sister's name? Are you the evil twin or the good twin?
Stacy Joe and Tracy Joe.
Yes. That's amazing.
It's embarrassing.
No, I love it.
And I have a
consistent.
brother named Joe Bob, so I'll just.
Oh my God.
That is all true.
Wow. All right. Bruce, I don't know if I got all this, but I think he was married for 25 years, has a 6-year-old daughter, 16-year-old daughter, and 2 dogs. That's number 1. Who thinks that's a lie? All right. He went scuba diving last year. He likes to scuba dive, and he caught 80 lobsters. Who says that's a lie? I love that number. It's so specific. It's like he named each one of them. Okay. All right. And he is an ex-Navy SEAL. Who says that's a lie? All right. It is time, Bruce, to reveal your lie.
I am ex-Navy, but I'm not an ex-Navy SEAL.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. All right. I'm going to trust your honesty. And with those of you who have gotten all 3 lies so far correct, stand up. All right, we want to see what happens. Oh, it's a battle to the finish. All right. Please stay standing up. We need you to stay standing up for this. Well, come on. You can do it. Stand up. One of you is going to win the prize. All right, here we go. Here we go. It's Evan. Did he meet his wife in Budapest? Raise your hand if you think that's a lie. Everyone can still play. You're just not going to win anything, but go ahead. You can play. It's all right. Nobody thinks that's a lie. You're going to have to tell me. He subbed for Charles Barkley in a pro game in France. Is that the lie? Okay. He says that's the lie. All right. And then, what'd you do with the Foo Fighters?
I got to sit in and play rhythm guitar during sound check at an event.
Foo Fighters. All right. All right. Here we go. No, stay standing up. This is a battle to the finish. Let's see what happens. All right. It is time to reveal what the lie is and who the winner is.
It is my dream, but I did not get to play at sound check.
So who's the winner? You are? You did it. Congratulations. You're amazing. Guys, thank you so much. Please come back and follow up and ask these guys a lot more questions. They're brilliant. Thank you.